to the premiere episode of Way Overthinking It. I'm Sean.
I'm Paul. The premiere. It's big words. It's a big word.
Yes, it's a lot of pressure. Let's stop and take a drink of that.
Yeah, I just, I got a little dry mouth saying premiere.
Right.
Just,
we hadn't even said anything yet.
You could feel it, the palmy, sweaty palms.
How's life in free America in Texas?
It's pretty good. What I don't enjoy is that I expected more of Texans. Let me put it that way. So our government, for the most part, done a better job than most, although I'm very envious of DeSantis in Florida.
Right.
But we still, so even though we're free now, technically speaking, a lot of businesses are still
not free.
They don't want to. Even though our numbers are plummeting and all that, it's still, so it made me a little disappointed in Texans overall. I thought,
but you guys had a baseball game tonight, right?
I know, that was exciting.
Full capacity baseball. I feel a lot like it's Red Dawn. If you say, or not the whatever, yeah, Red Dawn.
Red Dawn for the 80s.
Living in the one where the Wolverines and all that stuff. That's what it feels like if you look at the map of Washington State, where I am, and it feels like we're all trying to escape to the freedom country.
It's so weird.
It's like everybody wants to move to Texas here. So
it's really weird because my whole life I didn't want to move to Texas, and then I ended up moving here, and now everybody wants to come here after I've been here for years. But as you can see, I'm Californian originally and still love my state, although it is I know I wore this for you just the last time we were together, your team whooped mine. So that was a bitter memory. Still working through that one.
That's the worst too, because the 12th man isn't even allowed in the stadium. So literally the primary component of going to a Hawks game, other than it's a great football team.
I think it cost you guys the playoffs last year because your home record just wasn't very strong.
Leaving half deaf is part of leaving. The Hawks.
Now apparently Wilson wants to leave.
Yeah, everyone wants to do it. He probably is going to end up playing for Houston.
Oh,
is that an option? No, Houston's
not they got to
right now.
Right? Yeah, they could go to the Cowboys maybe. Well, they just signed Dak. I don't know.
See, we're starting off. Look at it. Who knew where we were going to go with all the theological, political underpinnings, and we started off with sports and
this is
movie trivia
for all the millions of people listening who don't know us. That's why we did this, because we just can talk, and that's what's so great, and I love it. And so, why don't you just talk about that? Talk about our vision for this podcast.
Our vision to talk. Well, the key component I thought tonight would be really important to make sure that we don't use any of the buzzwords that'll get you kicked off of YouTube.
Yeah,
definitely. Bloating. I said bloating. Don't talk about bloating or or anything like that, or
anything that rhymes
probably
with
anything to do with Sean Foyt. Sean Foyt.
Yeah, I don't know if he's at the bannable level yet, but he's definitely on the we're watching you level.
He's getting close. Well, Arizona is interested in inviting him to.
Did you see that?
I did
today. That was very interesting.
Welcome to Arizona. I thought they were good there.
I don't know, man. It's weird. They're open carry. They have all these really conservative laws, but they don't. But
they don't want Sean Foyt.
That was weird.
You can open carry. You just can't be Sean Foyt.
His tweet was hilarious too. He's like, "Thanks for this on Easter weekend."
Right. Well, no, one of the things we wanted to do is we want to create an opportunity to just talk about, primarily just what we want to talk about, kind of what everybody's talking about, but bring a perspective. And that's one of the things is going into this was recognizing it's really easy to go dark, it just is. Let's just be honest. Humanity, it's just really easy to just be like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling and no one's listening. And the mainstream media is just going to, spew their message out there, and they don't even need facts. And, even today, I was watching some stuff, and it's literally how things are phrased and said. I'm like, you literally you're mastering in half truths. And I thought, okay, what would be a great opportunity for to be able to talk about things, anything,
Yeah.
From a perspective of what it is to, to love life and love people and to be hopeful. So
Absolutely.
this is probably what you call my accountability group. You're going to be my accountability group, keep me positive, and
No
then
pressure.
the millions and millions of people also watching us right now.
Yeah.
So while you're watching, like, be sure, go ahead, hit the like, hit the subscribe, smash, do all the things that you want to do, because you're going to want to be back, because who knows, you might want to be here for that amazing keto buffalo wings recipe that'll come up, I'm sure, within the next
We're not afraid to hit it, especially on Super
Not
Bowl
afraid.
week, you know.
Live cooking shows. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your favorite? I mean, you should probably do that right now in the comments below. What's your favorite Super Bowl snack? Let's start now. Let's start the conversation.
I'm
so that
not
by
opposed.
the time Super Bowl runs around,
well,
if we're allowed to do that.
That's why it's overthinking it, because we just like to sit around and think about it and then pontificate, which is what we're doing. And I love it. I mean, everything you said. And I think you and I, we're kind of like every guys, even though, we've been in a lot of things, ministry especially, which has this, especially to the outsiders, kind of like a stodginess that's appointed when you think about ministry,
right?
Even think about like 20 years ago, you and I, when I grew up, I never wanted to be pastor or anything associated with that, because they were stodgy, they weren't fun. That was the impression I got anyways. And now it's like, but I've grown up and I still love sports and I love video games and I think politics are interesting and all this stuff. And it's kind of like, I could talk about all of it. I want to talk about all of it. But I enjoy doing it from this perspective that I actually believe things are going to be okay and the world's getting better, even when it seems like it isn't. And just like you said, it feels really dark right now. And when you said go dark, I know you, as you explained it, you were talking about negative, which is very easy to do. It's also easy to go dark right now and just completely detach in that sort of way.
Right.
Just close yourself off to everything. And that's, unless there's a season for that sometimes, but it's never healthy, or it's rarely healthy to do that either. And so what we want to do is kind of bring everything together, because you and I can't seem to keep our hands out of everything.
Right. We're trying.
Bring it.
Our wives are trying anyway. Our wives are, hey,
yeah.
You should stop listening to that stuff.
I know. I've gotten better, I will say. I had last year was rough, especially the end of the year. I couldn't stay away, but I've done a lot better.
I think a lot of it was, for me, I when I found, because that my point of view in life is always been pretty center. I've never been radically far right. I've never been. It's funny, in my circle of people, my far right friends are like, "You're such a lefty," and
That's awesome.
and my left friends are like, "You are such a Nazi." I mean, it's but we love each other. So somehow we still find this way to have dialogue and have challenging, and that's what I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I don't mind having a conversation. I just really am like, if we're going to have one, let's talk facts. Let's not get into hyperbole or gaslighting, because that's what I find out what's going on right now is a lot of it right now is emotional. And I think, something, we say a lot of the times, facts don't care about your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And which is true, but that doesn't mean that you eliminate the necessity to understand that there are genuine feelings that people have. And sometimes those feelings can get in the way. And so you have to acknowledge people's journey on that. And that takes a lot of self-control, because a lot of times I just want to cut to the chase. I'm just like, but here, but I understand what you're saying, but this is what's going on.
Oh yeah.
And I think fact-based conversations absolutely have their place. We'll do a lot of that, because I think those things are really, really important. But I also think that, being able to put yourself in the shoes of people who are, are not necessarily understand. If you understand the facts, you can kind of watch the timeline of a news cycle, and you can tell what's going to get traction and what's not going to get traction by the narrative. I mean, that's really all they're doing right now. It's funny. I heard somebody today who was, I forget what ESPN, he was talking about one of the ESPN analysts Oh, Skip Bayless. He was talking about Skip Bayless. And Skip Bayless, I didn't read it, but I mean, the guy who was saying it was really, he was credible. But he was saying that he had a talk with Skip Bayless, and he was saying that Skip Bayless will tweet things or retweet things, really not considering whether this is fully factual yet or not, but where it's spiking in the Twitterverse or in the algorithms. Like, if this is spiking, he's gonna get in on this conversation, whether it's factual or and I just thought that's sick.
Yeah.
To me, I just thought that's sick. That is the it's funny, like all the crypto guys today, I follow a lot of crypto guys on YouTube, and all of their their headlines on their YouTube videos are just all clickbait. And some of them even just own it. They're like,
it's all marketing.
Ethereum
man.
is taking off. And I'm like, hold it. I'm looking at my phone. Ethereum is down $200. What are you talking about? And so we live in this society that really isn't, that there is a strong part of society that's not super interested in the facts as much as they are just being seen. The problem with that is I think then they don't even care if they're relevant. It doesn't even matter if relevancy is a thing anymore. It's just, is someone going to click on what I'm going to do? Hopefully I can hook them.
Well, it's there was a study done. I can't remember exactly where it was from, but it was just a few weeks ago I read this, but it was like 65-70% of people only read headlines.
Right.
That's it. They stop at the headlines. And what are headlines? They're the most editorialized. I'm getting rid of my gum.
There we go. First day. See? Oh, God, gross.
It's the most editorialized part of a story generally, and so like that's all the opinion. And the newspapers know this, the magazines know this now. YouTube is a great example. YouTube, I can't tell you how many times I've tried to watch a video that I thought was going to be really interesting or relevant to me based on the headline, whatever it was, whether I'm looking for business or some fun, and then I'm halfway through the video and I'm like, they're not telling me anything. There's nothing here. It's like I just wasted 15 minutes. It's a total waste of time. And then by the end of it, they might go through something and like to come up with their 15 facts or of whatever. It's like 10 of them are just junk facts that don't help you at all. And then the 5 things they say, it's like, oh, well, I already knew those. I hate it. It is
a lot of the times the headline you'll get, if you get 3 paragraphs into the headline, you've read the headline, you get about 3 paragraphs deep, they completely invalidate their headline.
Yes. Oh, that's often.
By the bottom, they're like, but of course this hasn't, there's no hard concrete evidence that this is, it's like COVID is definitely transmittable after vaccine the possibility of COVID. And then like the third paragraph down, it's highly unlikely studies are showing that it's actually, the case. Or some just completely, massive headline, and then it turns out that the study or the story is about one person.
Yeah, well, that's what the smart papers do. That's like the New York Times in a nutshell. What they do, that's the smart papers do that, because then they don't have to print retractions, because they actually were honest in their story. But most people don't get that far.
Right.
And so that, they just fill themselves up with this nonsense. And it's just, it's very frustrating. It's this programmed world we're in now with social media, cell phones, everything is so like instantaneous. You just want that dopamine hit. Right. And so you just want that emotional pull. And so everything's built around it now. And, Trump was a perfect president for that, because he knew that and understood it. Like, it just made the media even crazier as a result. And now we're all in the aftermath of like what happens when he's gone, and then they're all agitated.
Right. Well, it's amazing how much they still need him.
CNN's down like over 50%.
Yeah. I can't think of even Barack Obama. I don't think was talked about as much. No. After, it was just unbelievable how much they talk about him now, but it really is true. It's kind of one of those things where you have to, and again, because I have a lot of friends who are progressive, a lot of friends that are staunchly conservative, it happens on all sides, right?
Oh yeah. I
think when we're getting into kind of some of the primary things that we're in right now, it's really, really interesting to hear, And because a lot, especially around a lot of those lines, so much has to do with fear. And so, I'll hear people reciting, I've got some friends who, got the vaccine and are vaccinated and, we're wearing masks and stuff like that. And I was like, are you kind of excited about not wearing a mask? One, I was like, well, you can still transmit the disease. I'm like, no, you can't, but at least scientifically, and he was saying something like, that Dr. F, let's just call him Dr. F, just in case, we don't want, and this is our first episode. We don't want to have somebody, we don't want to get on the radar just yet.
As careful as we can.
Yeah.
If not, we're recording it ahead of time. We can bleep if we need to.
Right. Dr. Manouchi Chowny. But he, he's like, well, he said something. I said, you know what? Give it 3 weeks. He'll change his mind. It depends. And so it's interesting because it literally does generate a narrative, and it almost, the narrative is, depends where you live in the country, where your media source is thriving from, But
I would say, I would have agreed with you in the past, but now being in Texas, it's like, it's surprising in a scary way how many people are just buying the media narrative. It's like, and I'm outskirts of Austin. So Austin is pretty lefty, and even for Texas, but it's still more. So it's like kind of what California was 20 years ago, so it's left, but like still they haven't gone full off the tank yet, at least most of them.
Yeah.
But I'm like a few miles outside of that. And I'm in a city that's Republican led, controlled everything. And everybody is kind of like, Austin is the joke. They're the conservatives who like go into Austin to work and come back out. But even here, like lots of people still wearing masks in their cars or walking to I'm like, do you know what the odds are of you contracting anything outside are literally zero, less than zero, And like when I see people walking to the store, putting their mask on, and then walking the full parking lot, it drives me bonkers. But it shows you, and I will say, even here in Texas, it's still more people than not doing it. Like I'm one of the rare ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my agreement I've made with them, because I don't want to make anybody mad, or I'm not going to be that guy who's like, no, I don't need to wear a mask. I just don't wear it. And then when they ask me to, I ask if they have one. And so I'm like, well, at least they can pay me.
You're going to wear
mask.
Because like here, mask mandate is in Washington. Mask mandates are still, very much a thing. And I, had been somewhat opposed to it at the beginning, just because I found the science to be ridiculous, especially when people would be like, believe the science. And I'm like, okay, well, but here's science. Which science do you want to believe? I want to believe, but this is kind of what I came to. And I've been to churches. That's one of the things in Washington State. I think if Washington State, genuinely knew how many hundreds of thousands of people are attending churches every Sundays without masks on, they would lose their minds. But I don't know about any of them. Don't follow me.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because and they're not having mass surge outbreaks and things like that. It's weird. It's really weird. But my daughter goes to a private school, so they're doing their thing. But it was really interesting because I was hanging out with a friend of mine, and we're at an event, and he was wearing a mask, and I was like, yeah, it's really cool, and he had a really cool mask, and but he said something to me, and there was a lot of people around him who weren't wearing masks. So, he was kind of the only guy, but he didn't care. He's not like a mask. He's proud of his, whatever. And he took it off for a little bit, and I was like, oh, dude, you don't have, don't feel any pressure. Do what you want to do. And he's like, oh yeah, no, I don't really care about it anyway. It's okay. Then about 10 minutes later, he put it on, and I was like, yeah, dude, that's totally cool. Put it on. And he's like, and he said this, and I was like, oh my gosh. He said, I'm not wearing it because I'm for safety. He says, I actually kind of like it. And I went, oh,
that's where we're at now.
Right.
I like
it was weird. And so this is my conclusion, because I've got some friends that are rages against the machine, right? They will not wear masks and stuff. I decided, where there's not a lot of grief, I'm good. I get a little bit of a stomach turn when I see like a 10-year-old kid walking down the street by himself.
That's the worst.
And he's wearing a mask. Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, this is wrong. I don't care what anybody says.
Toddlers, that kills me. And the toddlers in the stores and stuff. It's just like, oh my gosh.
But what I decided was this: a grocery store, there are people that are working there that are genuinely afraid. They're genuinely concerned.
Sure.
A lot of it is because we've been conditioned to be terrified, and a lot of it's because maybe they know people. I know people who've passed away from this. I'm not denying it's not a real thing, but they have to be there. And so kind of what I decided was I was like, okay, Jesus, what would you do in this situation?
Yeah.
And I honestly feel like, some people might disagree with me. I feel like Jesus would wear a mask in a store, not necessarily. Well, maybe he wouldn't. I don't know. But I feel like the most Christ-like I can be in a store is like, okay, listen, I'm going to do it because I don't want to create stress for you, right?
Sure.
And you have to be there. And so I don't want to. If I'm trying to be a positive influence on the atmosphere, then I'm going to do that, even though I think it's kind of stupid. And admittedly, I'm a noser, but that's for my own self. I can't, when it's all completely over my face, it just, I can't do it.
I don't know how
it's just
people
crazy.
breathe. I don't know how they've convinced themselves they can breathe, because it's awful. I do too.
And the double maskers. I don't know how you guys double maskers. I'm like, at my daughter's soccer game outdoors, I was standing next to a guy who's double masking. I'm like, you are outside. There's no one around you. And I can see, I'm like, I just want to be like, take it. I think, do you think, I mean, we've seen in Asian cultures for decades now that masks are actually quite common,
especially in Korea and Japan.
Right.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily know why. I don't think they're always fighting viruses. But
what I've known in Korea, so what I've heard in Korea is that they get a lot of the pollution from China, and so that's why they do it. And actually, in Japan, I think Korea was more so than Japan because of that pollution. Because I'm thinking now, like movies, videos, pictures I've ever seen in Japan, I don't ever remember seeing that many people wearing masks. I mean, it was more than America, but it wasn't like a lot. But I've seen pictures in Korea where a lot of people were wearing masks.
Right.
So I think some of it is that pollution comes over from China. But I don't know. And
if you go to a main airport here in the United States and you see people coming over from Asia, they're in the United, I mean, this is years past before COVID.
Yeah.
You would see them, getting off the plane and they're wearing their masks. And I was always like, what? You instantly think, is there something I don't know?
But what's funny is I totally agree with you. I'd see that in the airport, but then I never see it when they're walking around the city or anything here in America.
Right.
At least me, I never experienced that. And I'd always go to San Francisco and stuff. So there's Asian tourists everywhere all the time.
Right.
LA. I never really saw it until in January of 2020. My family and I went to Disneyland and we started seeing some people wearing masks that were Asians, and but they knew that outbreak was in China.
Something was already going. Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, but like backing up, to me, the saddest thing is I don't think it's just the media narrative. I think that's some of it, although I think in many ways the media is less relevant now than it's ever been. But what it really is, I think it's the bubbles. It's like, who are you around? That's what's feeding you.
Right.
Now, right. And I think that's even more so than ever before, at least as far as influence goes. Because it's like, your example is a great one. So I see a lot of people wearing masks here, but there's not as much of that fear. You don't sense that fear as much. Right. I've been out in the entire year. I haven't seen one person freak out at another person for not wearing a mask, even though I hear these stories.
Yeah. Right.
So there's something a little bit different in Texas. It's kind of like I'll have my eyes rolled out or something if I'm not wearing a mask in a place where it's not enforced. But there are people wearing them. They might roll their eyes at me or something, but nobody's bugged us about it.
You freedom lover.
Yeah. So I think it's these bubbles, because Washington's definitely more insulated in a liberal way. And here it's conservative. It's not as conservative as you think, unless you go out into like the real conservative small towns. But I think that's what a lot of it is. I think it's a lot of us talking to each other, because I know on our side, like center right, conservative Christian, in our circles, I feel like there's a lot of information that's shared, and most of it is the kind of information that's like deep dives. It's pulled out. Like as early as late March last year, when everything first shut down within a week, I went on Google and I started just like researching how dangerous really is this? And I was able to already bring up a death chart that had the ages broken down. And I already knew like, oh, I'm 37. I'm at almost no risk. And my
Right.
kids are even less risk than I am. This is nothing for me to worry about. And so I thinking that we actually had smart people running our country, which was dumb. But thinking that, I was like, this is going to blow over pretty quick because it's obviously not dangerous.
Right.
But that information that I got late last March, just checking on myself on Google out of curiosity, is still, that information is held up by anybody who actually knows what they're talking about and gives you the real information.
Right.
And yet that information has still not made it into so many bubbles.
Right.
It is crazy.
Well, I think that is the biggest challenge that I have found is I think the fear of ideas
Yes.
is my biggest concern. I think
Yeah.
because I am like, if you're so rooted in what you believe and that you are concrete that you're right, then whatever comes your way is going to stand.
Yeah.
And the only way that you're afraid is you're afraid that you have the truth and you know the truth, but the people around you are so stupid that they're going to be influenced by the other guy. And so you fear that, well, that's control. Then what you're saying is that you want to control, and that's what social media is doing right now. They are control. They are so afraid of the arena of ideas.
Yeah, free thinkers.
Right. They're so afraid of the arena of ideas that they have to control what they believe the lesser intelligent, and I'm saying it intentionally that way, what they believe that you are so unintelligent and you are so easily manipulated because they know, because they're manipulating you every single day. So they know how manipulated you are.
Sure.
But they believe that you are so easily manipulated that they have to control your inflow of ideas lest you get, drifted off. And so they spoon feed you these talking points. They don't do as they're not doing deep dives.
Yeah.
Because deep dives begin to actually start exposing the holes in a lot of these arguments.
Yeah.
And again, what you and I are saying tonight, we're not saying this isn't a real thing. This is a real thing. It has affected,
absolutely,
hundreds of thousands of people, 5,000, 500,000.
I had it.
I don't know. But I mean, we're not saying it's not a real thing. But what we're saying is the things that are being birthed out of it, the philosophies that are being, vaccine passports, which is probably going to be a buzzword. We should call that vaccine wax ports. But that's, and here's one of the things that I think that, to take something like that, it's really interesting because I don't think when they talk about things like vaccine resistance, I don't really think they are fully acknowledging, although I do believe they are aware, they are fully acknowledging the percentage of resistance that's out there on all sides. It's not just a conservative, middle, or left thing.
No.
There's a significant amount.
Yeah.
So I think this whole concept of passports, honestly, I think it will die quickly because if they do push for it too hard, and I could be wrong, but let's just let's mark this day and see if in a month we're talking about it because what I believe is if they start to push this too much, you're going to have to deep dive. It's going to start exposing what's really out there. And they don't want people to know that it's really out there. They don't want people to know that there's resistance out there. They want people to think everyone's swimming downstream or on this one, and there's just a few outliers. And that's not the case. It's not a few outliers. And if that gets out there, people start actually asking questions and thinking for themselves.
Oh yeah. Did you see the video of that? I think it was a tennis match in Australia, and they mentioned vaccines, and the whole crowd started booing. It's wild. You gotta see it, and that's Australia. That's like a place where you would expect them to be all about it, at least based on what we're presented with, media-wise.
They're getting a little grumpy right now because they're doing those snap lockdowns. Like Sydney just had that snap lockdown a few days ago, where it's like, hey, they don't even have a curve to flatten.
It's crazy.
They're flattening the flat.
Yeah.
And then if there's so much as a pimple on the back of the flat.
Oh yeah. Well, New Zealand's doing the same thing.
The body.
New Zealand is insane. Like they have like one case and shut down the entire country for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I could go on. Like, you get me on lockdowns.
We
That's
got to
even
come back up
worse.
again. We got to come
I
back
know.
up
I
again.
did not expect to go into COVID.
No, that's
but
what
one thing I did want to hit on though is like one thing I would keep wondering is that where, like, for me, it's just natural to go seek out information. I'm like, oh, this thing's going to impact my life. I want to know everything about it, which is exactly what I did once COVID hit the shores last year and they started talking about lockdowns. I was like, okay, I want to know everything about it so I can know what to expect, how dangerous this really is, serious do I need to take it. But I have a natural distrust of narrative. And it's probably
100%.
because being betrayed over the years. And honestly, like, I mean, I've been following this for a long time now, and I have loads of friends on the other side who, some call me Nazi, whatever, like you said, like far left friends. And these are not stupid people. Like, that's one thing I feel like in our disagreements, sometimes you can be like, how can you be so stupid? It can be a thought you have. But my friends are not stupid. These people I know are not stupid. The people I grew up with in California, they're not stupid. But I don't understand, like, is there a lack of curiosity, or how, after so many lies they've been fed over the years that have been proven to them, that they will even acknowledge, oh yeah, that didn't actually turn out that way, but they're still going back to the same source to trust that information. That baffles me, and I really just don't understand that.
I think part of it is because I've been kind of contemplating that, because I have these conversations, and like I've told you, I've had like fact-based conversations where I've like, we talk about laws, the Trump administration, he's racist or he's anti-LGBTQ, and I would literally offer people money. I'd be like, great. If you could give me one piece of legislation that is passed on the, in the Trump administration, and believe me, I was extremely critical and remain extremely critical of Trump for a lot of things.
Sure.
Which is why I would get, called a wallflower and a progressive. And it's like, no, I'm just using my brain. But, I would be like, I'll give you $100 for every piece of legislation that you can show me that, one of my friends who's a pastor is very pro LGBTQ community. I said, I'll give you $100 for every piece of legislation. I still have my money. Right. So the challenge is, I think, with the people you're talking about, I start to ask myself, okay, is it just a complete disdain for the truth, or is it a complete disdain for the other side? And so it almost seems like, and I saw somebody get interviewed once, and they said they were talking about the election and voting and whatnot, and somebody said, if you knew there was irregularities in an election, but your guy won, would you care? And they were like, no, not if my guy won. and I thought, I think, and I'm not saying conservatives don't do this, because I do believe that it happens. It happens across the board.
Yeah, for sure.
It happens across the board. But I do think, and I'm just saying this, and you could disagree with me in the comments below. Go ahead, disagree with me, because I would love to hear your thoughts in it. But I do think that more on the progressive side, they tend to just buy into this group. This is how to explain it to my dad. I said, there are crazies on all sides, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I said, but on the right, we know who our crazies are, and we can kind of box them up, right? We know who they are. We just, we know who they are. We box them up, and we're like, what you have to say, we are not interested. You are, you're nuts. You need to go take your meds. On the right, we know where our crazies are, and we can box them up, and we can dismiss them. We can just say their thought processes, the things they say. We just, on the left, I don't think it's as easy.
No,
I think there is this broad swath of stuff that it's like, I can't tell where all of these different organizations begin and end, and Antifa or whatever, where all they kind of begin and end to to just, the broader think. And so
Yeah.
it's a little concerning. Now, if somebody in the middle of it might say, oh, well, Sean, you're just being ignorant. We can tell you exactly where it is. That's okay. And that's fine.
Yeah.
But I think the challenge is then is it's like, it kind of feels like, and I mean, we probably lose, 100 viewers right now just because of this, but it feels like it's the craziest game of telephone. Somebody says something and everyone goes, yes, that must be true.
Oh yeah.
And there's no room for a deep dive, where I feel like I too tend to believe that conservatives, because we had a lot of non-Trump conservatives.
Oh, the anti-Trump crowd are never Trumpers.
And a lot of hold your nose voters.
Yeah.
Right?
Especially
a lot of
the first time. I don't think it was as much the second time. I think the second time it was very passionate, voters. But the first time, of course. Yeah. I mean, I would have been one of them if I hadn't had my own God experience where I felt like basically I was told Trump's going to be the next president, That totally changed my perspective. It was just a couple days before I went to the primaries. I was about to vote for Marco Rubio, and I had this prayer time, and I could show you my diary. It's March 28th, 2016. I just had this time and I wrote it down, and God just told me President Trump's going to be president and America's going to prosper and all this stuff. And I was like, are you really what? The guy making Roseanne jokes,
Right.
I
just remember Ann Coulter on Bill Maher, when Ann Coulter made that statement, Bill Maher asked Ann Coulter, so who do you think's leading the race right now? And she's like, Donald Trump, and the whole place just, lost their minds. I lost my mind with it. I was like, there's just no way.
I didn't think so. I thought it was just a funny blip that kind of was going to make the primaries more interesting, finally kind of push some of the Republicans to actually grow a pair. Right. And I was like, I could see him being useful, but I thought, no way in hell does this guy become president.
Right.
And then he did, and it was crazy, but I knew it ahead of time because so after I got that, I kind of started trying to see him through another perspective, okay, why would this guy be? And man, I tell you what, after 4 years, I used to be more traditional conservative Republican. And one thing and I can say this as somebody who was somebody who used to think Bush was a good president and all this stuff that has definitely changed over the years as I've learned more, but a Ted Cruz type. But man, Trump was actually very moderate in his positions.
Absolutely. Absolutely was.
But he was strong in a few areas. So here's a great example. Trump was the most anti-war president we've had in modern history.
Absolutely. And
that was a total, that was a rallying cry of the left for the last 40 years, right? I mean, Obama got in by, I'm going to end the wars, this needless Iraq war, all that. John Kerry could not get in because he was flip-flop.
Right.
I actually voted for the war before I voted against it. And Hillary Clinton voted for it, but it hurt their chances because all their people were like, no war, get out. Well, then Trump comes in, and all of a sudden, all these Republicans like myself who were led to believe the Iraq war was a good thing when it first happened, because I was I was trusting George Bush, and now I don't. But it's now I'm oh yeah, Trump just showed me.
Right.
We don't need to have all these wars. They're needless. We can have peace in the Middle East. And it should be you would think half the liberals would be oh yeah. But what's funny is that now they are making excuses to stay there.
Right.
Because that was Obama's policy and now Biden's and Clinton's. All the Clintons are hardcore war all the time. But it was Trump did this. So a very moderate position. And now what's funny is that most conservatives and Republicans now are we don't need new wars. He completely changed us. We changed. I changed because of him. But if I felt C.S. Lewis says this thing, I can't remember what book it's in. I think it's in The Abolition of Man, and it's so good and it's always stuck with me. But he says that he's talking why he's kind of conservative, because he believes in the fallibility of man, and conservatism at least limits government power. But he then says like what Jesus would be. And he says, I believe Jesus would be far more left than any conservative would be okay with, while also being more right than any liberal would be okay with.
Right.
And I'm like, that's kind of what Trump was.
Right.
But what's interesting is like a lot of Republicans and moderates and people who hadn't voted for years came out for it. But then liberals very much changed. And there's a lot of liberals. In fact, I would say some of the best news right now comes from disavowed liberals like Matt Taibbi, Glenn Greenwald, Tim Pool. These guys are all liberals. And Alex Berenson. These guys are amazing independent journalists now who are doing, in my opinion, some of the best news out there, if not the best analysis. And they're all disaffected liberals who with like left political leanings in most areas. But they're like, our side has gone nuts.
Yeah, they have no home. They have,
and so a couple of them ended up becoming Trump voters. You know, like not all about it, but Tim Pool especially is like, look, for me, it was like peace in the Middle East. I'm going to vote for Trump. And then the other ones just don't feel like they have a home anymore. But they're honest. These are honest, intuitive, deep diving, researching people, brilliant people who have left leanings, but yet they recognize how crazy their side's gone.
Well, I think it comes back to what we were talking about. We were talking about why the receptivity, at least from the progressive side. And again, I feel like I have to keep validating it. It happens on both sides, but why that
both sides
happen, why it seems to happen, I think is because they would totally buy into this idea, except for it was authored by Trump. It was an idea that Trump, that's why it was, he actually did, with the First Step Act and historical black colleges.
Totally.
Those are massively amazing things that did not get any airplay. I mean, you basically had Van Jones getting ridiculed for even giving Trump the slightest amount of credit because it was like, we cannot give him credit at all costs. You cannot humanize him. Jimmy Fallon got destroyed for just touching his hair because it was like, don't humanize him. We can't humanize him. We must destroy him. Yeah. And so anything that he did good, don't validate it. Don't talk about it. Doesn't matter. Well, it benefits the black community. Doesn't matter. Don't talk about it. Yeah. He cannot, so I literally think he could have just started spitting out, myriads of left-leaning policies and almost changed the progressive party altogether because they would have literally started. I mean, pretty soon you would have saw, if Trump wanted to raise taxes, they all of a sudden would have been for, tax cuts for the rich, it was just that kind of for lack of a better word, it was disingenuous.
Oh yeah.
Because absolutely. It was like, okay, so you're not really about policy and what's good for people. And and they kind of make the comment is always, the intolerant left, right? So, well, we're supposed to be tolerant. Well, ooh, and so that was, but I don't want to spend the night, banging on the left side. Cause when it comes to banging on the right side, we can dedicate an entire episode to that as well.
We will. I got plenty, I got plenty for that side. And
I noticed your George Bush wink. I was like, oh yeah, I feel that.
But what you were going to say real quick, I just want to say, like, I am an example of what you were saying, like how the right did that. Cause I was that guy during the Bush years when I was first young enough and young enough to be passionate, old enough to vote and be involved. I was very much just like, I picked my tribe and I didn't think through that very much. I just was like, I'm Christian, I'm conservative, I'm Republican. And I did all that stuff. And man, I can admit it. I was totally like just in that wave of tribalism. And it's like the Obama years and stuff, and just like all those defeats and a lot of humbling. And then Trump comes along, and now if you talk straight policy, I'm the most moderate I've ever been. If you talk, if you talk to a liberal, I'm all of a sudden a Nazi, whereas back then I was just a Republican. Right. And yet I've totally moderated. I'm so much more moderate than I've ever been. And I even can listen to, like, if we're talking policy, I can listen to left-leaning ideas in some areas now and just really be like, okay, I could see maybe we can make that work with this. Whereas in the past, I would have just shushed it. But
Right.
but now I'm the Nazi and you're the
Right.
Nazi, even though we're like very moderate policy wise. But
Right.
that's but that was I don't know. I mean, we'll go into this in another episode because it's a whole discussion. But what is it about Trump that created that fury? That's really interesting.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is, I think, and I don't mean to speak in generalities, but I've studied it. I've researched this. I've seen it percent, you know, and I see it just in my own community of friends of you know, because it's not to say on the conservative side there isn't hostility. There is.
Oh yeah.
But I don't think the conservative hostility or the passion, I don't know if the passion is anti-people as much as it is pro an ideology.
Well,
right?
I mean, I'll throw a wrench in that real quick.
Yeah.
I would say that there very much is. It's just a smaller percentage.
No, it's there. Oh, it's there because there is some that are just like, you know, the left is completely insane and they're vitriolic. But that's when I say that's when I go back to that box again. We know who those people are.
Yeah.
On the left, it can be a 51-year-old school teacher who's never even been very political their entire life.
Yeah.
And now they are vitriolic, like if you even so much as support Trump, you hate people.
It's crazy.
And why do you hate people so much? And because I know these people, I experience these people that are like, we were able to coexist before, and now the capacity to coexist is very strained and requires a lot of self-control on everybody's part because they so very much just hate the man, you know, hated everything about him. And I think part of it, and you're right, we could dedicate an entire episode to this, which, you know, maybe a quarter of an episode, because I don't know how deep I want to go on that one. But I think part of it was literally they just running into somebody like Trump was like running into a buzzsaw. This guy just didn't care. And I mean, literally, I would call family members of mine who were just diehard Trump supporters and literally just be like, what in the world is this guy tweeting? Get a hold of your guy, you know? Like,
well, and that's funny because had to let the dog out. Life still goes on, even when you're podcasting.
But I would just say, you know, can someone get a hold of your boy? You know, can you take the phone out of his hand and break it for the weekend? Because he's literally not helping here.
And I agree with that. And I totally, I mean, there was plenty of times he'd tweet and I'd be like, ooh, but here's the thing. Here's the hypocrisy in that. On the left, you get and I mean, sometimes it's the right too. So
you're not talking my hypocrisy. Oh, I'm offended. I'm leaving.
No, what I'm saying though is about the anger at the tweets and everything.
Right.
So on the right, you have the religious right, you have Christian conservatives who can definitely get way too much into culture war stuff, right?
Yeah.
But the left has always been like this tolerant place. So even though there's really raunchy, say like, let's talk about humor, really raunchy humor from conservatives and liberals alike, right?
Right.
Well, if that stuff was out in the open and the mean stuff and the roasting and the hatred that was just so mean spirited but kind of clever, funny, whatever, that stuff the right would back in the day get mad about because like there was a Christian, the religious part, but the left would never. They would just be like, "It's funny, get over yourselves, stop being so." Exactly. But then Trump tweets something mean. And all of a sudden they're like, well, this should be the office of dignity and everything. And I just like,
let's start an impeachment hearing.
Like, when you guys actually care about this stuff now? It's like, I hear the most horrible things from comedians who are now political, you know, analysts who say the most awful, horrible, mean, ugly things. And yet it's hilarious. And then Trump says something like, that's just a little off color. Let's say it's a 5 on, but because he's president, it feels like a 9, but it's really just a 5. Oh my God, the world's ending. You know, a great example of this.
No, it's true. You're right.
Yeah. And so for me, it was like, I thought it was just kind of funny because for me, even though I was like, I'd roll my eyes sometimes and be like, well, this isn't helping anything. At the same time, I was kind of like, but it's kind of awesome to have somebody on our side fighting like this.
Well, I mean, that was part of it is because they had such disdain for him.
Yeah.
And so now anyone who's even remotely supportive of him, they have disdain too, even if it's your own kid,
Yeah.
it's like, if you're,
jeez.
Yeah. Thanksgiving dinner got awkward. Thanks, Trump. But, it's, but they had such disdain for him as a human being that any other president in the world, if, Kathy Griffin tried to pull off what she pulled off with the severed head photo, she would have been canceled.
Crazy.
But you do it to Trump, and it was so weird because the hypocrisy, just the overt hypocrisy, is right there staring you in the face. And literally everyone who was supportive of that now all of a sudden is calling that art or freedom of expression. Freedom of speech is important. And it's like, if that was a conservative doing something opposite,
could you imagine
Facebook, Twitter, shut it
if
down.
that had been President Obama's or
so the thing is,
Clinton,
so we're all aware,
right?
So we are all aware of the hypocrisy, but it's not seen as hypocrisy because we are ignorant, and because we are ignorant, it's like you have intellectual progressive thought and the stupid cowboys and cowfolk who we cannot let their thought processes get out. And if we happen to make fun of their leader every once in a while, it's okay, because literally they're not a part of the intellectual dialogue here. It really is interesting. And the problem is so that's when you start to see all these people start to get upset, and they're no longer civil. Unfortunately, it's because you can only bully somebody so long before they start to scream and go, hold it, I'm not going to get bullied anymore. And that's where I start to get nervous, is because then it feels like then that's when the dialogue breaks down. And
dialogue's already broken down,
right? Well, but I think people like I think honest people, and like I said, some people probably disagree in the comments below and think, God, we're all wearing Trump clothing under we're all wearing Trump underwear. We are not, I can assure you. But but that people who like to have deep dives into intellectual thought, and also people like to have deep dives into conversations, to say, no, listen, let's see if we can find some common ground here. Or even if we can't find common ground, I at least have a better understanding of what it is you believe that I still totally disagree with.
Totally. And I agree with you. I mean, I think just what I was saying earlier about the news, the independent journalists I'm following and stuff, the liberal minded ones, they're those kind of people who are actually wanting to dialogue, and they're honest, and they're intellectual, real intellectual, not pseudo intellectual, not spoon fed, whatever, liberal professor college BS that is not really thinking. It's just, real intellectuals. I don't think hope's lost by any means. No. What I do mean, though, is that the divide is bigger than it ever has been before culturally. Because I could think, gosh, even I think the Obama years were a really good example, because Bush was pretty hated too. A lot of people forget that.
True.
And even though he was not a great president by any means, in fact, he was a pretty awful one in most ways. Even though 22-year-old me didn't think that, but looking back, I could say that.
Yeah.
Even though, but he was not as bad as they made him seem. But that hatred was always there towards conservatives for whatever reason. Most of it is that the media is controlled by the Democratic side. But Trump is just a whole nother thing in general. That dialogue, that gap was, it always felt bigger during Republican years, but it went from the Grand Canyon now. It is just insane.
Right.
And
it's always very personal. It seems to get even with
so
Bush,
personal.
It's extremely personal. It's always challenging.
I remember music videos of him being Hitler. They said the same thing about Bush. But what I would say is that, to me, the one thing that this showed me, and I feel like kind of woken up to in the last few years, it's like, it really does seem that there was kind of like and there still is kind of like this culture of elites, that
Sure.
even
Yeah.
even on the Republican side, and like there is kind of like yeah, you win a few, we win a few,
Right.
but we're all still trending towards the same direction.
Right.
And Trump was the first one that broke that up, and that's in a long time. And that to me is the only thing that makes sense about why the hatred was so deep from the top, and now it's filtered down to the people. But that's all I can make sense of it all.
I think I really do think it brought to light just how fragile our discourse really is.
Yeah.
And which is good. You need to know, you need to see.
Yeah.
And then I think well-meaning, honest actors will be those that will try to heal in that, I mean, through all of this, there's only one relationship that I've actually lost, a friend who we were doing so well. And then January 6th happened. So I lost one, relationship, and he just blocked me, disappeared. And it really made me sad, but I understood, that he was just angry, and there was just no conservative, so he didn't even ask, like, do you support this? Do you believe in this? Which would have been a good deep dive conversation, but it was mostly for him. It was just like, I'm just done. I'm done with conservatives altogether. I just can't even, and I think they blame a lot of the state, emotionally, of the country on Donald Trump. And I would just say, if you could sit down for a minute and, one guy saying stupid stuff cannot whip the country into a fever pitch.
No,
he can't, because we all have to have the kind of the intellectual prowess to sit back and go, okay, that's just a dumb guy saying stupid stuff, but look at his policies. But we had to, but that's the thing, is the demand for conformity is so strong in our country. It's like, we need you to be like this. We need you to think like this. We need you to say like this. And if you go outside of that, then you're ruffling the system. And then what we found with the media would do is the media was like, this guy will not conform. We're going to go ahead and set the planet on fire. We're going to go ahead and whip up false narratives, and we're going to say half truths, and we're going to just literally paint such a bullseye on him, and just whip everyone up into such a froth. I honestly do, but I think if someone wanted to challenge me with it, I'd love to sit down and talk with them, because I honestly think there is no case that someone could make that the tweets whipped our country up into a frenzy, even remotely close to the media whipping our country up to a frenzy. And that was one of the things that I appreciated about the intellectual dark web, which I don't know is the fact that you had a Sam Harris, Eric Weinstein. They threw Joe Rogan in there. I don't know why they threw Joe Rogan in there, but but the Jordan Petersons, they had literally all of these different points of view, but they were extremely intellectual points of view, and they could sit down and they could dialogue, and they could even disagree and be able to part ways. And the funny thing is, and I'll kind of end my rant with this, but the funny thing is watching all of these different points of view get, and there was strong left. Sam Harris is not a conservative by any stretch of the imagination.
Dude, no, and not only that, he's like a hardcore anti-Trump guy.
Right. So to watch these people coexist together, right? Dave Rubin,
they're all friends.
Right. And to watch them coexist and share different points of view, literally got ridiculed from the left. The right was totally fine with these conversations. They were like, I think you guys are stupid or whatever. But it was a betrayal to the left to even sit down with these guys and have a civilized conversation. And to me, honestly, I'm just, that's all I needed to know.
Yeah. Well, a good example of that is Bill Maher, who Maher is hardcore left, hates Trump. But man, I really enjoy his rants when he goes after his own side, which he does pretty frequently about
Yeah.
stuff like cancel culture,
Yeah.
or the shutting down of ideas, and or even like when there's really some dumb thing that goes on, he'll be like, how will you think normal people will want to
Right.
be associated with us?
Right. Right.
You know, and so he hits those points. Now, I don't know how he somehow maybe he just keeps throwing them enough bones where like they allow those to get away, or he's
Maher
funny.
survived his own 2 years ago. Maher survived. Bill Maher almost was canceled 2 years ago for something he said.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I've forgotten about that.
And he dodged it. It was shocking.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
if a conservative had said half of even implied what he'd said,
yeah.
it'd be gone. It'd be over.
Oh,
He
totally.
dodged that bullet, and so I think he kind of has. And so I don't know. Maybe he feels a little bulletproof, to think, well, I can kind of take on the left now because they tried to cancel me and they can't. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I lost a friend too last year, right after the George Floyd stuff, and we were just going back and forth and debating. And one of the things I've noticed too, when they really are raging, anybody, and it could be on the conservative side too, but it's that anytime you throw a good point in, they don't address it. They just move on to the next thing. They won't concede your point. So that was happening a bunch, but then all of a sudden I just got a note from him out of nowhere on Facebook. It was like, I had no idea you were such a racist after all this time we've known each other, and I just can't be friends with you anymore. And and he did some like really lame thing where it's just like, but I'll be praying for you, something like that, and like, this is a friend of mine who I've known for 20 plus years, and he's Latin American, like he's Hispanic, and we were like best friends at one point, and always been close off and on. But man, politics totally, like, he went so deep on that side, that all of a sudden our relationship, all the hours of days and days of trust I'd built up, just gone. Like, not one racist comment in all of our hundreds of hours together, anything. But all of a sudden I'm a racist just because I don't agree with him.
Right.
That was that incitement. But anyways, having said all that, because we've been going on a while here, what do you see though as, like, in all of this craziness, what is giving you hope moving forward? What are you looking at? Both in like maybe what you're feeling, but also in like what you're seeing that is more concrete.
Right. Because we do want to talk about hope.
Yes.
I can see people going through this, almost hour now, and they're like, oh boy. Yeah, we're basically just living out people's conversations in their head, which we're here. We can do that for you too.
Yeah.
Actually, what gives me hope is, one, just an awareness of the bigness of God in all of this, because He's bigger, right? He's bigger than even the minutia that tries to tranche us down. I mean, He is always, keep your eyes on me, keep your eyes on me. So keeping my eyes on Jesus in the midst of all of this is one of the things that's the primary, recognizing that, this isn't the beginning and the end, but also at the same time, because you have to understand, or the way I'm seeing it, the church is going through its own transition right now too.
For sure.
Right? I mean, it's not just the conservative, progressive core values that are being stretched, challenged, and articulated. The church's core values are being stretched, challenged, and articulated as well. And I think that there's some things that we're like, oh man, this sucks. This is a thorn. God, will you deliver us? And it's just like, I can just see Him like, no, I'm really good with you guys, working this one out. And sure. and having to navigate this, with Him, right? He's not abandoning us. He didn't jump ship and be like, hey, I'll be back in a little bit. So what gives me hope is the fact that we get this opportunity to kind of navigate these waters and hopefully grow and hopefully mature. And I think as we begin to, mature, that begin to just to walk in a greater level of the kingdom, greater level of authority, greater level of hope, being able to articulate that hope, be able to articulate that authority. One of my friends says it really, really well. He says, there's a reason that the church does not walk in the fullness of power right now. Right. When Jesus was encountering the disciples were like, hey, Jesus, can we call down fire? And Jesus is like, you know, if the church had the capacity right now to call down fire, Nancy Pelosi's house would be on, would be on fire tomorrow. Sure. Right. Yeah. Because of immaturity, because it's just flat out immaturity.
Totally.
And recognizing that Nancy Pelosi is not your enemy. Nancy Pelosi is a daughter of the king. And that those are the eyes. So I think what gives me hope is Holy Spirit really allowing us to go through this, to begin to see where our hearts are at, and to be able to respond and to repent, and to, as Bill, says it really well, the repentance is choosing God's thoughts over my own thoughts and coming into agreement with his, and so, so asking the Lord to see things. So honestly, that's what gives me hope is, this gauntlet that the church is having to go through, and we're all going through it in different degrees. You're going through it in different ways than I am. Sean Foyt is going through it in different ways than you are, so we're all going through it in different degrees. But at the end, I think there's going to be a resilience that the church will see that by grace, not only did we survive in this, but we thrived in this, right? This is the same, without getting into it, too deeply. It's the same experience and encounter the children of Israel had when they were taken into captivity. Everybody's like, we're getting out of here. We're getting out of here. We're getting out of here. In 2 years, this is going to be over. By Easter, this pandemic will be over. Where have I heard this before? And the commission of Jeremiah to them at that time was, hey, listen, by the way, they're wrong. But after 70 years has passed, for I know the plans I have for you. And we kind of forget to go up to, verse 4, 5, and 6 was thrive in that place.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
I love those
build
verses.
houses.
Yeah. Build
gardens,
houses. Make your homes there. Yeah.
Make your homes. Yeah.
Home. I love that.
So it was like, hey, in the midst of this, thrive. Yeah. So I think that's what gives me prosper. Hope. Right. And so it's days are hard. I have good days. I have days where I'm just like, oh Lord, and it's tense and it's real life. I run a company and do other things, and I run a church and I run a ministry, and it's hard, but I think that those are, the opportunity to count it joy, not because I'm trying to suck it up and smile through the pain. It's to recognize, that it's the character of Christ. It's being developed. It's the character of Christ I want to know. It's being developed. So that's the only hope I have, honestly.
Yeah. No, that's good, man. So for me, it was like from October, when the election was getting ready to happen, through January, through all the craziness, all the words we can't say, right. When all that was being evaluated and the hearings were happening and the Supreme Court might make decisions, all that stuff going on, I just lived in this constant intention, just what is going to happen? Felt like off and on angry, but also just just on the edge of my seat. And it just felt like I couldn't rest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then January 6th happened, which was just in so many ways.
Yeah.
And then a couple days passed, and a couple more days passed, and it was just kind of okay, this is really just not going how I expected or hoped for, or, really prayed for. But then all of a sudden, and I can't even describe it because it was nothing I did, nothing shifted in my circumstances. But all of a sudden, I just had this immense peace. It was just settled in, and it was just oh, everything's going to be okay. And now I'm seeing all these things happening that I think are awful, like the border crisis and the talk, like you said earlier, the vaccine passports, all this stuff. And through it all, I have more peace now than I did even when all that other craziness was going on. But the guy I wanted to win was in power,
Right.
And so for that one thing, that tells me that God is supernaturally working right now.
Right.
And then what I'm seeing too is that through all of our discussion, everything we've had talked about tonight, that level of tribalism on, I think overall, but particularly just talking about the left right now, it's getting smaller and smaller. There's more and more people, and I see it on Twitter every day. I just see it in all these aspects, but people being like, this isn't what we voted for.
Right.
Things were better before. Like,
there's an awakening among the woke.
There's an awakening happening,
Right.
and in the church too. And the church, to me, is the most important part, because I do believe that as the church thrives, the world will thrive. That's my eschatology, which I can't wait to get into in another time with you,
right,
and really piss people off.
Right.
But actually bring them a lot of hope.
Don't take their rapture away too soon.
But
you can keep your rapture, everybody. We were just kidding.
Yeah.
Please. You can keep it.
Just might look a little different than you thought.
Yeah. No, do your own. Make it. Do it yourself. DIY rapture. No problem. You won't be here for it anyway. Rapture. You can do your own. You won't be here for it anyway. So make it whatever you want it to be.
That's awesome. I love that. But the church has been shaken out of this cocoon that we were in. Even the people who were like bunker people, which I like to call them, that were just waiting for the end time. I like to say I've lived through like 20 end of the worlds.
Oh,
you know, Y2K,
sure.
Mayan, 88.
Oh, yeah.
All those. I mean, there's more I can't even think of off the top of my head. But I've lived through a lot of apocalypses already. But there's those people who they didn't feel like there was any need to do anything because of that, because of, the 70s, Hal Lindsey, all that.
Sure.
But now those people are grandparents or even just parents. And they're like, well, shoot, like there's crap going on and we got to fight for our kids, because I don't care who you are. When you actually have kids and grandkids and you've seen that, it's like, it's really hard to not fight for them, even if you don't think it's worth it. You still go through the motions. Well, I think less people are going through the motions now and more people are stirred to action.
Yeah.
And I think people are like, we can't just hold back anymore. Now, the challenge is going to be a lot of Christians getting into arenas, which are awesome, which they should. We shouldn't be holding off in our little huddle anymore. We should be going out into the world. The challenge is going to be not be coming into being overtaken by the political spirit or whatever. It's going to be still remaining kingdom, Christ-centered people going out into that. But I'd still rather have that problem than the problem of people not moving, with having momentum on their lives. So I think the church is getting more momentum in that area. I think the church, if anything's happened in the last 4 years, I think the church has learned to fight again.
Yeah.
Now we're going to have to learn to fight the way Jesus fights,
Right.
But like that'll come, I really believe. So that's happening. And then what's also happening, and I'm hopeful for, is that, and this is one thing we actually didn't talk about either, is that tribalism that's been fostered over the last few decades, a lot of it was fostered and allowed to just sit there because of comfort. Because no matter how bad things got, overall, things were still pretty comfortable in America. And it wasn't really until the last 18 months that we've gotten really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that is stirring up a lot of people. And it's forcing people to wake up. And as more and more rights are being taken away, more and more people are waking up and saying like, wait, what?
Well,
I didn't vote for that.
Yeah.
I never thought that would happen. And so for me, I really believe that in the next 4 to 10 years, we're going to see a shift where all the craziness we're seeing now is really just a small minority of people still in their little corners, but all their power will be gone.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see moderates and conservatives, but not like political conservatives, like just conservative traditional people, Joe Main Street.
Right.
These guys, that's who's going to start coming back into power. And I really, truly believe God has shifted stuff, and all this craziness has shifted stuff so that America can really become a country of the people again.
Yeah.
There's still going to be some pain. There's still going to be some things to go through. But I actually think the shift the momentum's already happened, and it's just a matter of time. I really don't think it can't not happen now. I have no doomsday thoughts. I don't think we're falling apart. I think literally this is something that really hurt and had to happen.
Yeah.
But just as you were saying, God wanted us to go through it. That was God's grace, because what he's going to birth out of this, and is I really think going to be the best era any of us have ever seen. That's really what I think.
I think it's a good way to wrap it up because I mean we are I mean think we're going into the weekend that celebrates the season where a group of people literally got excited about the fact that they thought that this man riding on a donkey was coming in to take over. Right? They are convinced that this guy on the donkey is going to come overthrow the Roman government and
take down Caesar.
And they're going to take down Caesar, and their guy's going to get in, and everything's going to be okay. And then apparently there was some voter fraud in the
oh wow
and their guy didn't get in, and so they were all dejected. But it was because there was a bigger plan, there was a greater plan, and so there was no but I mean, and what it was to live with, oh gosh, okay, hold it, our plan didn't happen. And I mean, I think that's one of the big exclamation points that we kind of leave out of that story.
Oh yeah, totally.
Is the fact that you could even say that the disciples, even who spent time with Jesus, it's still somewhere in the back of their mind. You could even I don't even know. I mean, you could even say with Judas, because Judas probably had the same picture that listen, I'm going to make some money here, but at the end of the day, this guy can take care of himself. It's going to be okay. We're good. They all kind of had some ulterior motives in mind, and I think in a way that kind of exposed ours too, of kind of like, what is it to throw all of your eggs into something and maybe but I mean, I guess I would say this as we wrap up tonight, everybody who you stuck with us, through our first episode. And if you're on the left, we just want to say we love you, because if you're on the right, we love you too. So hang in there with us. We're this is the first one where you get it all out. I promise we're gonna have a great topic conversation about goldfish and Bitcoin and how decentralized currency really is, because I'm getting alerts right here while I'm actually looking at my phone right now, because
that's awesome.
I'm waiting for an opportunity to get into ADA again. But
there you go.
But but we thank you guys for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next week. So have a great Easter. I'm Sean from Washington. That
Paul from Texas,
from Freedomville. We'll see you guys.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Have a great weekend,
Easter.
guys. Happy Easter.